Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
As the Starbucks barista said to me this morning, hi, Paul. Hello, Boo. So,
They know you by name already.
You know when on day 2 of the conference, the barista already recognizes you and says, hey, Boo, as a greeting that you've arrived. So, we've had our caffeine.
Nope. I'm caffeine free.
And we're ready to go. Oh, well,
I'm caffeine free. But I got some seltzer from this free healthy vending machine in the exhibit hall. Go check them out. It's great. I thought I was going to have to pay for this, but it's free. Yeah, little plug.
So what we're here to talk to you about is the use of social media in engaging with your students. So some very practical stuff. We'll give you a little bit of background on this too, but how to create a strategy for engaging your students from a departmental perspective. And we'll tell you a little bit about ourselves. Craig, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I'm Craig Bideman. I'm a graduate student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I'm originally from Oregon. I did my bachelor's degrees at Oregon State University. So any Beavers in the room, you're my best friends. I don't think there are any. Oh, I would have heard of Go Beavs. Okay. So you can tweet at me at Craig Bideman. Yes, it is a misspelling of my name. And I'm at craigbideman@gmail.com. And I have a website, which is pretty sweet. I'm on the job search. So Boston schools. Hint, hint. Hey, how's it going?
And your master's research is on?
And my master's research is on student engagement through social media and how that affects student development and how universities can play an essential role in that development.
And that's really how we came together. Craig's doing his research on his master's thesis. I'm doing some research in my doctoral work. And my name is Paul Brown. I'm a full-time PhD student at Boston College. And I'm the acting assistant vice president and dean of students at Fashion Institute of Technology in New York.
Very recently, so give it up.
So we came together. I thought, let's do a collaboration together. We interact online quite a bit, but we've never actually presented together. Mm-hmm. And of course, we do some research in some related areas and some work in related areas. And so we thought, let's combine forces and do something today. So that's kind of what we've got in store. If you want to tweet as a part of this session, it is very Twitter friendly. There's a hashtag you can use. There's our own Twitter handles up there. Just a few minutes ago to this hashtag, I sent out a link that includes the slides that you'll see today. So if you want to reference that later, there's also some supplemental information that goes to a website that you can follow along or check that later. So the folks that are watching at home can also access that.
The session is also virtual session friendly. So hey, everyone that's tuning in, hey.
So our goals for this session is we're going to talk a little bit about some macro level trends just to set the stage for you in terms of what's going on with social media. Give you some real world examples, so some actual examples of an institution that used kind of 2 different social media approaches with their students. Talk a little bit about how to rethink about the engagement process as it relates to social media, and then go into some very specific things that you can do. So our goal is to go into some very practical hands-on takeaways for you. If you want to know some of the background, some of the philosophy pieces and things like that, we can also fill that in too, but that's not necessarily what we're going to focus on today. All right. So, broadcasting versus engagement. That's what we titled this session. The reason for that is, if you look at the way folks use social media, and this has happened more in the past than it is right now, but the kind of general departmental reaction to getting on social media goes something like this. We need to get on social media.
Okay.
Why is that?
Don't know.
Because the students are on social media.
Oh.
So where's the nearest grad or young person in the office?
Millennial.
Please do the social media, and then I'll go about my work, right? That's usually kind of how this develops.
But I also have work.
Yeah, that's usually how this goes about in a department. And so usually when folks do that, they tend to think from a broadcasting lens, meaning that social media is just a replacement for the poster. It's an electronic version of the advertising means that we used before, but not as a platform that can be used for engagement. And folks that use social media in a smart way, in a strategic way, understand that it can do a lot more than just push out posters and information, but it's an opportunity to engage with your students. So social media is a tool. It is something that we can use to accomplish a task. But it is also a context. And this is the part that people miss. So yes, social media, you can pick it up, you can use it, you can do certain things with it, but it's also a community. There's different spaces that you enter in when you're working with students. And that's what I mean by context. And so when you begin to understand social media as not just as a tool, but also as a context, your orientation to it changes a little bit. And when it comes to social media, you don't have to be an expert on everything. So if you've come here and you're like, I don't even know how to use Twitter, or I don't even know how to use this platform, or things like that, that's okay. We're going to help you through that a little bit, and don't feel like that should be a barrier to you understanding some of these broad concepts. So, a little bit about trends, what's going on with social media. Just some broad statistics for you. This comes from the Pew Internet Life Project, which has some great broad statistics about internet usage and social media usage. As you can see, 98% of adults 18 to 29 in the United States are on the internet, so that's virtually everyone. And 89% use social media, 67% on mobile. These statistics are already a few years old, so I would imagine that mobile number is actually a little bit higher at this point. That is really the primary way that our students are accessing social media. And if you look over in the lower left corner there too, you can see social media use by age. Probably the most significant predictor of someone's social media use is their age, relative to any other demographic factor. So folks that are older in age tend to use social media less than those that are younger. Also, if you look at broadly, this is all 18 to 29-year-olds, what platforms they're on. Facebook's still #1, followed by Instagram, which has really risen a lot within the past year to 2 years. Twitter, Pinterest, and LinkedIn in that space. Now, we'll go into a little bit more nuance on this, because just because a lot of students are on Facebook, 1, doesn't mean they use it all the same way, or 2, doesn't mean that they are actually using it at all, right? They're just on it. They have a presence.
And a little bit into some of the research that I'm looking into it from a developmental standpoint. So some of the research that we've gotten so far from our survey at UMass Amherst is that 79% of students report that they utilize different social networking sites to reach different audiences. And so that really impacts our work and the way that we think about how we approach Facebook, how we approach Twitter, how we approach Instagram. It shows us that we really can't think of them all in the same way. 90% of students say that they would research an unknown topic that their friend had posted about in order to understand their point of view. From a developmental point, this is saying, hey, I'm kind of wanting to learn what you're posting about, and that kind of shows us that they're on this developmental track of self-authorship, that they're really learning, they're really developing, and their peers and their interactions online are really having a big impact on that. 68% have been the target of a repeated unwanted contact online. That kind of was pretty alarming to me. I almost thought the number was going to be a little bit higher, but then 70% say that they have taken the action to block or report that person or account. So that's a pretty good number to see. But at the same time, this also affects the way that we approach how we interact with cyberbullying and intervention strategies. Then we also found, well, go back. There we go.
Yep, there's a little delay.
There we go. So 12% actually feel uncomfortable reaching out to a friend about a concerning post. That was kind of rough for me to see. That shows we got a lot of work to do potentially in how we talk with our students about intervention strategies. And 62% say that they alter or censor their language to avoid potential controversy with their audience. And I think that's a very good representation from even my own experience and my own friends' experience. Like, this is something real. Like, people are trying to make sure that they're not actually contributing to the controversies that we keep seeing in the media. And 29% feel comfortable intervening in instances of cyberbullying directed at their friends. So again, looking at how we approach cyberbullying intervention and those sorts of practices. There's a lot of work to be done there.
Great. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you 2 examples now. 2 examples come from actually my alma mater, which is Boston College. And one where they produced a video that gives you a certain impression of the college, and then we're going to watch the second one right after that. So there's really kind of, good and bad ways of viewing it social media, right? Like, One of the times when I present on this a lot is a lot of people come from a deficit model. Let's talk about the bad things that are happening online, right? Yik Yak is awful because of all these bad things that are going on, but not always necessarily the productive things that it can do. And so that's what we're going to play off of with these two examples we've got. So we'll watch this first video here that comes from my alma mater.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Here come bad news talking this and that. Well, give me all you got and don't hold it back. Well, I should probably warn you, I'll be just fine. No offense to you, don't waste your time. Here's why. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. Your love is too high. Bring me down, can't none bring me down. I said, because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happiness is the truth. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you know what happiness is to you. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like that's what you want to do. Come on.
All right. So based on that video alone, what did you learn about Boston College? It's happy. What's going on there? Good community? Diverse. In what ways? Diverse in what ways? Gender, racial, dancing Jesuit priests. Great.
Yes.
Great recipe for viral videos, dancing Jesuit priests.
And yes, there is snow. We know. We just came from
snow.
it.
There's a snowy place. What else did you notice? Lots of ways to get involved. Yeah. So there's a lot of different things going on in this video that was very positive for Boston College. In fact, their social media team put together a kind of an infographic of the first 100 days after this video went out, how successful it was in kind of reaching people, and people engaging with it, and things like that. So it's a great example of a very slickly produced piece of content. Obviously, this took course over the few days, and they put a lot of production value into it and had some people do some really good work on it. But it shows a broad range of the university. So things like viral content and things you can do with video, some of the outcomes, these weren't necessarily the outcomes that they told me, but I looked at what it was and I kind of backed it out a little bit in terms of developing a sense of community. This is something that could engage alumni as well as incoming students, as well as current students, as being a part of this process. And a lot of ways that you can use social media in a productive way to understand what's going on. Now, I will also tell you that Boston College was one of the first and heaviest adopters of Yik Yak in the country. And so many of you might have heard about Yik Yak. There's a lot of articles related to some of the negative comments that go on in that space. And we're going to see the same institution again, but through a slightly different lens. And so we're going to watch a video, and I'm only going to show a portion of it. But it comes from a group called FACES, which is a diversity education and advocacy group on Boston College's campus, that reacted to some of the things that they saw on Yik Yak. I will warn you that the language in here might be a little difficult to hear. Kind of any ism that you could probably add into some of this language will show up. So I just want to give you that little bit of a warning before I go in there. So watch a portion of this, and then we'll talk about it.
Yik Yak is not a new BC Confessions. Although it's anonymous, there's no filter, which is why there have been hundreds of offensive posts, including comments that are racist, sexist, and homophobic. These comments are not only extremely hurtful, but they also depict Boston College in a negative light. Recently, there's been a lot of talk on campus about reducing the stigma surrounding mental health, but this task is impossible if we ignore the root cause of why there are BC students who are unhappy here. Comments like the ones on Yik Yak are the reason students feel unwelcomed by the BC community.
I don't hate you because you're Asian. I hate you because you're not white.
Asian people language sounds like a severely autistic person blabbering shit.
Some bitch dropped her phone, and after I picked it up for her, she didn't even give me a blowjob.
The most offensive thing that I can think of is getting the KKK to burn a cross outside of Stayer.
Hookup culture at BC is a joke. I went to UMass and saw a girl getting Eiffel Towered in a dorm hallway and nobody batted an eye. Step it up, sluts.
I get Black History Month confused with every other month.
Question for gays. Why do most of you have that gay voice thing?
Asians, it's okay that you speak a different language. Just don't shout it.
There are two types of humans, men and baby makers.
Laundry is a woman's job, plain and simple.
Nothing better than a white girl with a nice ass. This is what MLK wanted.
How about we don't use the word retarded? It makes you look like an ignorant ass. Be a good person and use a different word that isn't highly offensive.
Retard. Try being a person not so easily butthurt.
This post is super retarded.
Anyways, we don't need to watch the whole thing. It is available if you go to that website that we had tweeted out if you want to watch the whole thing. We have some links out to that. But why I like to put these two pieces of content together is because it's the same institution, right? So in the very first one, you had a very slick marketing type view of the institution. And in the second one, I think you have perhaps a more realistic version of what goes on and how to engage in some of these difficult conversations that you did not see in the first video, right? And so there's kind of two different ways of looking at social media that I think you can take away from this. The first one is a little bit maybe more on that kind of broadcasting realm. There was some engagement, sure, people putting it together and people engaging with the content. That's true. But the second one has even more aspects of engagement too, starting campus dialogue and conversation about some of these things that go on. Because again, to harken back to when we talked about social media as both a tool and a context. It's a tool you can do something with in a community space. Yik Yak is a community space where discussions happen, where development happens. Sometimes negative, sometimes positive. Positive things can go out. It's just like it would be any other campus space. And so when thinking about how do you use social media smartly, think about these two examples and how you might use it in both methods for engaging with your students. Now, I did want to point out an interesting little thing, because a lot of folks talk a lot about Yik Yak, of some folks at Colgate that had a Take Back the Yak campaign. You might have heard about this. The faculty jumped on Yik Yak as well to try to disrupt some of the discourse that went on there and join that space. So it says, the moment when faculty start wishing us a good day on the Yak, the end is near, from one student. I think perhaps one of my favorite ones that came up in here is President Herbst right there. Right, second one, it says, just herp, derp, derp, from the president. But I think it's also a great example of how individuals, even us as individual professionals, can engage. So it's not just about the departments, but us as individuals. I have, in my role, I have a dean Twitter account, and I'm the digital dean, or whatever they want to call me. And I interact with students. They know they're talking to me. They're not talking to my department, they're talking to me. So it also can happen on an individual level. If you wish it to, right? There's some questions I think you'd want to answer as to whether you want to do that. So let's jump into a little bit of more of a framework and kind of a philosophy behind things.
So a lot of my work, I work in the Center for Health Promotion at UMass Amherst, and we're going through a whole redesign there. And a lot of my work over the last 2 years has been helping them develop new marketing and social media strategies so that we can reach our campus in more effective manners. Because when we got a brand new director, they were told to kind of get rid of the existing educational materials that we had. So we kind of started over from scratch, which in some ways was actually really exciting because I got to do a lot of new work. And I'm currently doing this work and we'll be finishing up soon. So a lot of what I focus on is how we are strategic about how we approach students. So contrary to popular belief, social media doesn't just happen. It's not something that is just, hey, we need to be on Facebook, so start a Facebook and post some things, and we'll forget about it in a few months, and then that Facebook page is going to sit there. That's not how this stuff works. That's not a strategy. That's getting a Facebook page and leaving it there. So a lot of what I try to do is develop plans. I have developed marketing and strategy plans at UMass Amherst for 4 departments, and then 2 other for internships that I've held for other institutions. These are actually a lot of fun for me to make because it can start, like these plans can start at very elementary levels, depending on who is in your office and who will be using this. So it's like, what is content? What is digital storytelling? What is Facebook? Like elementary things that to some people, but then it can evolve into very specific things that need to happen on your campus and that need to happen with engagement with your students. It also takes a lot of trust. I have had a lot of conversations that have been very frustrating from the perspective of someone who is somewhat of a social media crusader who believes in this stuff for student development, in which I've had a lot of administrators tell me there's no reason, no time, no effort, no money to put into this. And that keeps leaving me feel defeated. But I'm not going to give up because I have a lot of faith and I have a lot of trust in social media. But it also takes the department. And it takes the people involved having trust and having faith that this is something that you really want to do. Because instead of replacing posters, you're going to be actually engaging. You're not just throwing things up there and saying, well, we hope people come to our event. And then when no one comes to our event, why didn't anyone come to our event?
And if there's one thing that universities like, it's control, right? And social media does not like to be controlled. So letting go of a little bit of that control is difficult. That's difficult.
Because higher ed institutions have existed for hundreds of years. Social media has existed for tens of years. Like it's not something that a lot of people are comfortable with, and that's understandable. It also takes a team. Go Sox. Yes, it takes a team, and honestly, like I'm a one-man department right now when it comes to marketing in my office, which is hard because I'm responsible for 2 different teams of peer health educators. I'm responsible for 3 different sets of like educational marketing kind of design work as well, and then social media. So there are a lot of things that, as a young dude who has a lot of responsibilities on top of grad school, that's a lot of work for me to do by myself. And I've been consistently trying to just poke and poke and poke at my administrators and folks that I work with. Can we get some students involved in this? If we really want to be engaging with some students, we gotta even have some trust and faith in our students. The ones that are good at social media. At UMass, there are a lot of really good students that are great at engaging their community through social media, because we have a very active political campus, and they can organize. And my big suggestion was, can I hire some of them? Just to bring them in and work like 5 hours a week with us to like get a little internship credit or something. Like, that's all you really need to do, because those students clearly know how to engage their peers. And if we're afraid to bring them in and help us out, then what are we really doing? What are we really wanting? Instead of making more work for us, let's bring in people who want to do this work. It takes a lot of dedication. John Cena, he's my man. In some ways. It takes a lot of perseverance. You're gonna fail with social media. You are. But that's the thing with new technologies. There are gonna be a lot of trial and error. You can't just give up on it. If you're really wanting to dedicate yourself to this and develop strategies, you really have to have a lot of dedication to this sort of, this outlet. And like I said, it takes a lot of trial and error. Like, you're not gonna get everything right with Facebook with every post. They're not gonna share every tweet. They're not gonna favorite every Instagram post. That's just reality. They're not gonna see it all. So it takes a lot of research into when are your students, go there. Oh, well, not to the next one, sorry. So it takes a lot of like understanding how your students are actually using these networks. And social media, you gotta be a little fearless. Like, social media, to its root essential, is putting things out in the public. There's nothing more vulnerable than that. And even as an institution, there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And if you're bringing students in to do this work, train them. Show them how to have certain conversations, to do certain intervention strategies. Not only does that give you more help, but it also trains them to be more responsible with their social media. And they might even engage their friends when they're not working in how to be more responsible with their social media as well. And like I was getting at, I should have reordered those, research your audience. Know who is using what. This is what I'm doing right now at UMass Amherst, so I can give this information to our student affairs people, even to our marketing people. What are our students actually doing on social media? What do they want from social media? What do they want from our university? Understanding these things is important, so ask. Ask them. Develop some sort of survey. If you want questions that we've used, contact me. We can talk about that. It takes some time to develop those sorts of things, what you're wanting to get from it, but it's possible.
Great. So let's jump into some of the things that you need to think about. You're going to ramp up your presence. What are some of those things you think about? The first thing you're going to think about is, who is your audience? Who is it you're potentially trying to reach? You're going to answer this in different ways depending on what department you work in, as well as maybe what institution you're at. So are you trying to reach all students? Are you a campus that interfaces with every single one? Is that your goal? Maybe there's a subpopulation, a certain subset of that group that you want to reach. It could also be parents in some cases, because they're going to look maybe there for information, alumni, or even some kind of stakeholders. For instance, if you're in a career services office, perhaps your social media presence is actually more for the employers than it maybe is for the students. So you need to think about step back and think, who is our audience here? And that's what will then guide you through a lot of the other parts of the process. After you think about your audience, you also want to think then about which tool you want to use, which social media platform you might want to use. Now, we saw this graph before that showed you some kind of general, broad statistics about where students are. But if you start drilling down into some of the demographics of what's going on there, things become a lot more interesting. So people might initially see, oh, well, all the students are on Facebook, therefore we need to be on Facebook. But they use Facebook in different ways. I can tell you from my own research and talking with students when we talk about how they engage online, so how do you use Facebook for? They said, well, I don't really post to it. I might look at the feed. I really just use it for Messenger, the events, and I'll batch upload photos so my friends can see it. And then occasionally I'll like my mom's status so she feels good about herself because she just got on Facebook, right? Those are usually the answers I get to why they're on Facebook. So does maybe your department going to get a big bang for your buck by being on Facebook if your students aren't actually looking at beyond maybe the events feature? Maybe not. So when you start drilling into this and looking at how different students are using that, that can also then guide what you do. So you can see here that women really like Pinterest. So if you have a female population, or if you have women in your population, then maybe Pinterest is more appropriate for you to use than some others. And there's also some other interesting things going on here. This is the one I find most disturbing, actually, is when I started talking about social media, a lot of people, or even just technology, a lot of people said, well, not all students have access to technology. There's kind of a social justice issue there in terms of access. Well, I'll tell you that because of the rise of mobile, almost everyone has access to technology, even at any kind of price point. So that's kind of at least eliminated some of those access issues. Not all of them, but a good chunk of them. But if you look at these statistics, and this breaks down by family household income of less than $30,000 a year and more than $75,000 a year, take a look at LinkedIn. Where are the rich people? The rich people are on LinkedIn. What kind of network is LinkedIn? Jobs, professional jobs, things that you do. Well, wouldn't you want the households that have lower incomes to be on that the most, because then that can raise their social mobility? Probably, right? And so I think when we start looking then at individual platforms, that's where some of these social justice issues start to arise, is who's on what, how are they using it? Because if our students that are of lower SES aren't using LinkedIn, that's a problem. And so maybe we need to put more energy there. So think about what those demographics are and who might use what, not only for your targeting efforts, but maybe if there's a place where you need to focus energy to educate your students to help them. So there's a lot more nuance when you're picking a platform than you might think at first. The other thing I want you to think about is, what is your GIFT, your G-I-F-T, okay? So that stands for a few things. First one being goal. What is your goal in social media? What's the outcome you want to achieve? What is it that you want by being on social media? If you can't answer that question, then you probably shouldn't start engaging in this process. Are you there to be helpful? Are you there to have customer service inquiries come in? Are you there to be a champion for your students, talk about their success and help share things, provide information, right? I talked about social media not being just a poster, but it still in some ways is a poster. That doesn't mean you can't do that. But it's not just that. So think about what it is your goal is when you want to achieve this. The second piece is to think of your identity. What is the identity of that account? And that could be, is it an office, kind of a royal we, like it's not really anyone, but it's the office's presence? Do we know who this person is? I mentioned that I have my own Twitter account as dean. Students know when they're tweeting me, right? They're not tweeting my office. And there might be some reasons you want to do that. Or maybe is it a persona? So can I interact with the mascot of my institution? And maybe that mascot will interact with me. So you can create a persona, kind of like Flo from Progressive, right? You can tweet with Flo. You can message with Flo. So maybe you even want to have a little fun with it and create a persona. So after the goal and the identity, you want to think about how formal you feel you need today. And formality, are you going to use emoji? Are you going to use internet shorthand? Is it going to be more formal? Think about what level of formality you want. People usually default to the more formal, but there is a way that you can be really engaging and fun and maybe use some emoji or even maybe use some memes with students. We'll see an example of that coming from Wisconsin. That can still be appropriate and still fit maybe with your brand or however you want that to be. So it really depends. It depends on your office, depends on the type of information and what you're using. So if you want to use Grumpy Cat, you can. Okay? Don't be afraid.
It's totally okay
to throw a Grumpy Cat. And very much related to that is your tone. Is there kind of a personality to your account? Is it playful? Is it sarcastic? Is it authoritative? What kind of tone are the students going to experience when they interact with you? And so that's what GIFT stands for: goal, identity, formality, and tone. I should give a little shout out to Liz Gross, who has an ebook that she put out on this related topic that she outlined something very similar to this, and so that's where I drew this from.
This line I have
Mhm.
happening right now. Social media.
Yes.
Next one. There we go.
Oh, just for the picture? Excellent. Yeah, it is interesting, especially if you look at like, let's say, Instagram. Black students being, or people in the 18 to 24-year-old, 18 to 29-year-old range, being much higher than other counterparts. There's interesting things at work there.
Did you see a lot of diversity in terms of how these play out differently in different regions of the United States?
This information comes from Pew Internet Life Project, and I haven't seen regionally what that is. I'm guessing that it probably does, and it will also on your campus. So it makes sense that Craig, in looking at UMass Amherst, would look at, okay, what are these students using and what is that? Because these are very broad statistics across the whole of the United States, right? So that may be different, especially if you're in an international context. That can also play a big role in it, right? So if I'm in the UK, these statistics could be very different. But you almost have to do a little bit of research down to the micro level on your campus, because they might be using things in different ways. Like I said, BC was a heavy user, one of the first and heaviest user in the country of Yik Yak. So maybe Yik Yak is a platform that BC should look at to engage with its students. So, all right. I know, so much animation in this.
All of the animation. So what we're going to get at next is show. I'm a real big fan of accounts and departments that use social media in a fun way, and that is still very engaging. And one of my favorite accounts is the University of Wisconsin at Madison. If people follow them, you've probably seen some of the ways in which their manager Nate takes handle of the account. And I talked to him a couple weeks ago because I wanted to just get his perspective, knowing that I wanted to mention it in this presentation. And his thought was, we have a fun campus. So why is our social media not going to reflect that? And so the way he manages some of their interactions is pretty hilarious. So someone tweets, for the first time in 5 years, the University of Madison course catalog was released, but I have no interest in reading it. And he just responds, "You make me sad." It's a GIF from Monty Python. And that's all he does, just posts a quick picture, no other thing, but this is next. How's our late night library crew doing? Don't join the hashtag if you can help it. So, and then a student responds, "It's nap time. We never said it'd be easy. Keep the dream alive." Hitting the snooze button. See, showing a little bit of their identity, so giving it a pretty fun, light tone to. Oh, go back. Skipping my lecture because the guest speaker is from Madison. I knew I wouldn't learn anything I don't already know. Hashtag Hawks forever. Then it's a GIF of Andy Richter scoffing. Well then, okay. Madison makes me nervous, like OMG. Then they respond with a great intervention. Deep breaths, we're here if you need anything. And then they respond, this made me smile, thank you. That's beautiful. This is the sort of interaction you want to see. It shows that the account and the person behind it and the university cares. And that's awesome. This is a pretty cool example, I think.
Who is manning that?
No, it is a former, this is great. So Nate is a former undergraduate student at the university, and then he was hired to do that job.
And what department is he in?
Oh, he's in the department of, it's actually University Marketing and Communications.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the university's account.
Wide account.
It is that's the what is that sign? Certified account. So of Madison, yeah.
Yeah. And it's things, go ahead.
Well, and I think so, but related to that, for example, the last one I know, the photo of Andy Richter.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a random student posting their thoughts about the university.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not exactly presented in a very positive tone. I mean, I like the reflection back on it, but it's kind of reminds me a little bit about the Yik Yak earlier. I mean, not to that extreme, but it's still not a very positive tweet. That makes sense.
Oh no, completely. And I don't actually think it's from a student that goes to that university either.
Yeah, you see Hawks in there. So I'm thinking it's a student that there was a UW-Madison speaker. But I think your point's all the same, right? Mm-hmm. Is that sometimes being present in this space can kind of change dialogue and engage with students. And also remind them, when you put these things out there, they are public, so people might see them.
Including the people who man this account.
One of my good friends, Patrick, who works at an institution in New York, a student tweeted out something about, oh, the dining hall's out of cream or whatever for the coffee. And so he tweeted them back and said, well, where are you? He said, oh, I'm in this dining hall. And so Patrick then called up the dining hall and said, hey, you're out of cream. And then he tweeted back the student and said, the cream should be there now, right? And so something simple, something funny like that, you might think of like, oh, that's cute and that's it. But that engagement with a student has just communicated to them that you're listening, that you care. And so that's why these things also then get into the retention sphere of students feeling attached to that institution. And there is research about that engagement that says the more you engage on students with Twitter, the more likely they'll be feel connected to the institution and all of these things. So that all kind of plays, even though it seems like it's kind of harmless and maybe even a little funny and things like that. I know when I'm on BC's campus, if I post a pretty picture of our main building, Gasson, on Instagram, that either the BC main account, BC Athletics, or BC Alumni are probably going to like that picture. And it feels kind of cool when they first do it, too. So I'm like, oh, they're paying attention. That's kind of neat. And sometimes they'll say, hey, do you mind if we use your picture in our own marketing? Yeah, go ahead. And so it changes that dialogue by doing this kind of thing. And sometimes being a little bit more informal can be scary. And it might not be right for every institution. It might not be right for every department. But there are things that you can kind of play around with.
And again, that takes trust.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to touch on is about content. Because social media wants content and fresh new content all the time. And so as you ramp up this presence, you have to change your orientation to the way that you think about the things that your office does. So when you have events, you need to be taking pictures of them. You need to be doing videos of them. You constantly need to be thinking about what is this content that we can then feed into these channels and can keep using over and over again. So think about who is it that's developing our content. What is that? It could be students. It's a great way to employ students in doing this. It doesn't have to be a staff. But are you constantly documenting and taking pictures and writing art or maybe short feeds about what it is that your department's doing so that you're constantly having this content that's important? Very huge for team dynamics to come into that. Brainstorming is huge in content creation, utilizing your students' opinions and their ideas on what they would want to see, what kind of content they would want to engage with and share. And it's also helpful, too, then, to plan out what is the content going to look like on our account. So if you develop this kind of matrix, and I created them, this is a fake account, this doesn't exist, but let's say it's a leadership or a student activities type office. You know, this office has decided that 40% of the stuff that they push out is going to be leadership articles found on the web. Students maybe in a leadership class on campus have to write some blog posts, so we're going to then use their content to both highlight leadership principles as well as the students themselves. We're going to do 30% of highlights, so staff, student leaders, little bios about them, maybe pictures, something to highlight them and celebrate them. Pride photos, so we'll do about 10% of every now and then, like Happy Friday and with our mascot and things of that sort. And then 20% we'll do deadlines. So if there's an org fair coming up and things like that, we'll put out some of that information. So step back and think through your content, because this actually kind of is starting to create the personality of this account, right? Based on what content you're sharing, it's creating a certain kind of personality or feel for what this is and what students can expect when they interact with it or follow it. And so that's part of that planning process, that going in with that goal and thinking about all these things when you do this. So I want to pause here and see if there's any questions that you have about some of the stuff that we went over. Yeah?
When you're creating an account, going on Facebook or Twitter or those things, do you create lots of separate accounts? Do you advise your student staff to create separate accounts, so sort of official personas versus their own personal Facebook pages?
So I think I think that's going to depend on the department and how many different. Because right now in our Center for Health Promotion, we have a lot of different things that happen. Like we have a basics program, we have our peer health educators, we have our comedy troupe people, we have our education on just simple health, and then we have like the main one. So what we've tried to do is conglomerate some of that. So we're not just like, we're not repeating the same thing on a lot of different channels, because I think that sort of repetition is somewhat annoying. So what we try to do is our office really only has like 2 real accounts for Twitter, and one of which is for the performance group that I oversee, because we have regular things that we do all the time. And then the main office kind of sends out all of the other broad things. Like, here's this thing that our office does, this thing that our office does. Granted, we're still in the middle of a redesign, so like that's for us making sure that we're not having a whole bunch of different moving parts at the same time. So I think it's kind of understanding exactly what your department is going to need for that. But also when it comes to like Facebook or Instagram, a lot of those things can get difficult to manage when there are a lot of different ones, and unless you have people designated for all of those things, it can get out of hand. So that comes along with your whatever team you develop for doing this sort of posting, really knowing who's going to be taking charge on all of those things. So it's not just one person having to be like, oh yeah, I need to go do all of those things now.
And I was consulting with an institution in Colorado. It was fairly small, and some offices there was an office that offered a service that probably really only realistically about 5% of the population would ever need to access for any reason. And so they had a number of social media accounts, and they were an office of, I think it was 1 or 2 staff members. And so when I saw that, I said, is that the best use of your time? Are there ways that maybe you combine with other offices or you handle that centrally? Because you expending a lot of energy on that when you might not be reaching as broad of an audience might not be worth it for how small you are and the resources that you have. Now that may make sense if they're trying to create a small cohort-like community that uses it a lot, but their audience wouldn't necessarily be the broad university environment. So part of that I think too is what should maybe be centralized, what should be decentralized out to the department. Different institutions will also have different policies related to that. I know some marketing folks like to keep control of a lot of those social media accounts, and some are like, go ahead, do what you want. And so that can vary a little bit too. But I did actually a version of this with Ed Cabellin at ACPA, and he's been doing a lot on a divisional level in student affairs. So he's actually got quite a bit of good information. Actually, it's on the same blog that you would have seen this presentation on if you go down a couple articles. But he also talks about what does it look like as a strategic part of the division and things like that. And so that's a way I think you can play off of what should the department do, what should he handle centrally, what are the roles of those. If you're a small department, maybe you give up a little bit of that to some other folks. You know, if you're a larger department, maybe you have more. It depends. So, yeah, back there. Well, you just gave away which institution you're from.
But we are trying to figure out, our students tweet him first, the problem in the residence hall, and the light goes out, instead of tweeting the residence hall account. So how do you establish presence when you tweet the main person? So how does that work? What type of strategy?
That's a good one. Mm-hmm. That's a real good one. The question was, they have a very active president. Yeah, they have a very active president on Twitter, and so what's now become the students' behavior is they tweet the president first rather than going to the office that is probably most appropriate to handle that question. I have to think about that.
How would you manage that, digital dean?
You know, I'm.
This is nothing new.
Go ahead.
We have the man ready to go in the office.
And so what would presidents do if they got that same kind of email? They would just refer it
right on.
to the housing and residence life division. So the president could just say, oh, thanks for your comment, CC this person.
Yeah, Ray's suggestion was you pass that forward to the appropriate person, just like you would with email. In fact, that's actually a good point, is for some reason when we get to social media, all the strategies that we've developed in the past, we somehow forget them, like they don't work anymore, when that's not necessarily the case. And so that's a strategy. I think there's also a practicality though too. If you're on Twitter and I'm on my personal account as the president, am I constantly going to be doing that? Or maybe I have someone who also kind of goes in and helps me a little bit with that process, especially if they're as active as I'm guessing the president would be at a large state institution in Ohio. So we've got time for one more question. So back there was first, so we'll go back there.
It was actually just a comment.
Or a comment. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm actually just practicing social media listening, and then I'm not basically, if it's what it is, I'm looking for his name. So I'm searching for his name, setting up a search on Hootsuite or whatever you use software, and then I'm responding to the questions about practicing social media listening. So say if it's about wrestling, an alert for that.
Yeah. Yeah. The suggestion was using social media listening, social listening, which is a term for basically creeping. That's what you should tell when people say, I'm creeping on you on Facebook. I'm like, call it social listening.
Yeah.
It sounds so much nicer. Basically means that you're listening in on the conversations
Less
that are
lawsuits
occurring.
that way.
And tracking that. So even if someone's tweeting to a different account, you can see what's going on. So to leave you with some things to think about is this kind of process takes time. You will not be able to ramp up your social media presence in 2 weeks and be ready to go.
Social media doesn't just happen.
Exactly. It takes a process to get there. So you have to think through this. It's a strategic thing. You need to be consistent and dedicated. So if you're just going to create it and let it go kind of dark for a while, you won't be successful. So you need to be strategic in what are the things that I know that I can really commit to and do well. And if there's things that you can't, they can either come later or you just don't do them. Social media is not required every time. So oftentimes when we look at programs, I think, what social media component can we have to this? If it doesn't make sense, don't use it. You don't need a social media element to everything every time. And we also want to leave you with a few resources that may be helpful to you. When I speak and consult on some of these topics, there's never enough time for me to give you the tutorial on how to use Twitter or how to use some of these accounts. So I created for the folks usually I speak to this website, Higher Ed Tech Bootcamp, where I put some videos and some information about basic things that if you're like, you talked about Yik Yak, but I don't even know what it is. I put some links up there where you could go to and you could find out what that is and how that works. There's also, think about what it is that you already have with you that act like social media accounts, because those still work too. So think about what resources you have that you can kind of maybe do a hybrid with your social media projects. Also, actually on the Higher Tech Bootcamp website as well, one of my good friends, Laura Pasquini, for her doctoral dissertation, took a look at all the policy documents of all institutions related to social media. I think she gathered about 250 of them. So this links out to her database that she put together that if you want to see other institutions' guidelines, and it is international. It's actually not, it's a little bit US-centric, but it's pretty broad ranging, with probably a heavy presence of the United Kingdom and Canada in there as well. As well as studentaffairsresources.com, which again redirects to another page for you that can help in terms of your engagement on this. And so that's our session today.
Thanks so much for coming by. We hope you guys learned something.